Howdy, howdy. How are you guys doing tonight?
What's happening?
And what
What's
a
Brian
night.
doing? Going glasses to no glasses? What's going on there, Brian? You're not
Well,
committed to the look, huh? Tease, but
right,
not committed.
right. There we go. I don't want to look
Master
too,
beekeeper,
I
master beekeeper, Brian.
no, no,
Now,
no, no, no. Well, I heard that, the guest that we were having on tonight, so I look at that, trimmed the beard almost all the way off. I went and got a haircut. The girl that cuts my hair, she's like, anything going on? I saw just we got this like interview lined up, and so I got to look good and everything. So, right. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I can't quite, I'm getting a little nervous here, so just put
I'm just
those
gonna
over there.
I'm just gonna leave my hat on because you don't want to see what's underneath that hat. So anyway, great. So guys, what's going on? How's it going? How's it going up in Northeast Ohio, Brian? Up there near Cleveland.
It is 41 degrees right now. But I can't complain. The last 2 days we've actually broke 60 degrees. So my surviving colonies that I do have, I peaked on them. Did not have a smoker. Cracked some lids. The girls were bumping me some. I was waiting for my venom therapy. Did not get any. So I was upset. I wanted to get the venom therapy. But it's okay. I saw a couple just kind of hanging tight on the front of the hives that had little specks of pollen, and I thought, oh, thank you. So, but I think it's going to be turning around. We got a little bit of cold here coming up, and then all next week when I'm actually going to be away, it's going to be above 60 with a low of like around 40. So I think things are looking up. Let's just say that. I don't want to count my chickens before the eggs hatch here, but I think overall things are looking up.
Awesome, Greg. What about down in your neck of the woods?
oh, it's a beautiful 60s and rain today. Getting cold quick. It was super windy. Going down to snow and 20s tonight. So I'm out unhooking some trailers and doing this, and to throw the barn coat on, and it's just I'm glad I'm not a cow or a pig or a bee right now. It's just the constant up and down weathers is rough. So there's a lot of folks out checking bees today and finding dead outs, and so a lot of folks are calling and you're trying to get packages and nukes ordered before we sell out. And for everyone who's been reaching out recently, asking about queens, yes, we will be turning queen orders, opening those up here. But we've been hanging on to that for a little while. But a couple things, Bruce, that are here in the near future that I'm pretty pumped up about. Monday, March 17th, I'm speaking at the Medina Beekeepers, talking about queen rearing the easy way. And then, so that's on a Monday. Then that next Tuesday, we're going to the Fairfield County Beekeepers Association on March the 18th, also talking about queen rearing the easy way. And then got a really fun collaborative live chat with Dara Scott with the Hive Alive is putting on a little webinar, and they've asked me to collaborate with them, and that is on that Thursday, March the 20th. So that's a pretty fun week coming up here in a couple weeks, just back-to-back talks. And you guys know me, I just can go and go and go. So I'm going to work on getting my vocal cords ready for the workout, but shouldn't be a problem. Other than that, it's just getting a lot of stuff done around here, getting orders packed, working on getting skids of stuff shipped here and there. And just I'll just quickly say thank you to everybody for all your support here for Nature's Image Farm and Endura Hive Wax Dip. You guys are awesome. It's looking to be a super awesome year, and you guys have made this happen, and really appreciate all the support. We're really looking forward, like everybody is let's just get into this year and let's get moving. Let's put all this colony loss and this winter and everything behind us, and let's dig in and let's get back to bees. And a lot of us are going to be digging in there, and you've got no choice but to make splits and look at increase and entertain maybe some different ideas. And so, Bruce, I'm excited about tonight's talk when we kind of can get into that with our guest Matthew, and have a lot of fun talking about bees and splits and queens and you name it. So, Bruce, what's up in your neck of the woods?
Well, as you know, if you've been watching the channel, I've made splits, I guess 3 weeks ago on Valentine's Day, to try and get some increases down there in that Appling Farms area where you came and helped me out, Greg. And then the next week I made splits to help tone down and tame my mean bees, I called them. I said some people call them defensive, some people call them aggressive, and my bees were just plain mean. And so I pinched a few queens and got, I split some of them down pretty hard, and some splits ended up a little small, but I think they're going to be okay. And so I placed, I think, 55 queens, and this is a spoiler alert. Nobody knows this unless you've talked to me, but it'll be coming out in the video. But since we're here on the stream team, I can go ahead and disclose this. I have over 90% acceptance on the queens from both weeks, right around that 90% mark. And so they're beautiful, beautiful queens. And now we're going to see how they do. The weather's been pretty. We've had a couple of chilly days, but nothing really cold. And so the bees are just kind of plowing through, and that's kind of what we're doing here. The last 2 videos have done well. I appreciate all the support. And then the next one will be hopefully coming out this weekend about the actual queen acceptance. It's going to be mostly from the first week's worth of queens. I didn't really do much videotaping of the other week, but overall it's been a really fun month here. So, starting with really when you came down, Greg, and brought those boxes, and then, and I will tell you this too, and you'll find this out in the video. We pretty much all the nukes that were strong enough to move up into 10 frame boxes, we put in the new Enduro Hive boxes with the logo. And Jeremy helped me with that this past weekend. And so I'm kind of focused on that Appling Farms bee yard. I'm trying to do that there. And because that's the most visible bee yard. And then we'll kind of grow out from there. So that's what's going on here. But without further ado, we'd like to bring our guest on tonight. See if we can get old Matthew up here.
Hey.
Here's Matt. Let me move him up. There he is. Matthew Walker is a local beekeeper. He's about a little over an hour south of me here in Chipley, Florida, in that area, right, Matthew? And Matthew is a commercial beekeeper. And Matthew, we'd like you to just take a couple of minutes here and tell us your story a little bit about your beekeeping experience, kind of what you're doing now with your bees, and just kind of where you're at, and just kind of give us a little bit of background on yourself.
Yeah, sure. I started beekeeping in 2017. I got a job actually right down the road on another bee farm. I don't know if you guys know Kirk Jones with Sleeping Bear apiaries. He's mostly based out of Michigan, but they keep a branch down here. I started there, worked there for a little bit, and kind of was running my own bees on the side, just a few. And then I eventually got a job with Barkman apiaries. They're over in Bluntstown, Florida. I worked there for several years. They're a pretty large outfit. And just kept running my bees on the side. And I think this is my 3rd year full-time, working for myself full-time now. We top out at around a couple thousand colonies, and we're going to try to go beyond that this year. We're going to see if that works out. We mostly do like almond pollination over in California. That's probably our primary revenue source. And probably the second one we're working on is queen production. We're trying to get really heavy into mated queens. That's what I'm really focusing on this year, making that our number one priority. And then, we'll do honey and stuff, a little bit of everything. We sell a little bit of equipment. We used to do a lot of nukes, but we're actually not going to sell any nukes this year, which my customers are a little upset about, just because we want to reinvest all those hives back into our business this year, and just see if we can't bump past that 2,000 mark, because our goal is usually to send about 2 semi-loads to almonds every year. And like, we barely made it, like by the skin of my teeth. So I want to just try to boost our hive numbers up, just so it's not so close. It was pretty hectic. And honestly, I think we only quite made that second load is because there was such a massive shortage over in California this year. Last I heard, there was like 100,000 hives short. So, I mean, they were taking boxes, just so the farmers could get their farm insurance, basically. So that played in our favor, but I'm going to take all that momentum we're going to gain from that extra revenue and just dump it into the business, and try and budget for 2 loads a year. But that's pretty much it. I do it full time. It's just me. My wife helps on the weekends. We just hired a lady to help us do queen cells on the weekend as well. But I manage pretty much the 2,000 hives by myself. So it's I rarely have time off. But since most of the hives are in California, I've kind of got it easy. They're going to be back here in about 2 weeks, and my life is going to disappear. So,
yeah, for sure.
But that's how it is.
Well, that's great, man. It's nice to have you on tonight. The reason it's just kind of it's kind of strange. I think, you know, Tyler Walker, no relation, right? Tyler's just the same, it's your last name, but Tyler, folks who see my channel may recognize that name. He's a commercial guy, really very similar to you, a similar number of colonies. I think he may do some things a little differently, but I know you guys are not far apart. Really, you're about an hour south of me, and he's like about 45 minutes southwest.
Yeah.
He's down in that kind of Black Alabama / just right across the border. He's right on the border down there. And so he, you know, I know you guys do things together, and actually he's the one that gave me your phone number so I could contact you. But the reason I kind of found you is kind of strange. I think I may have heard him mention your name before. Didn't really know who you were, but I just happened across a video you posted. I think it was yesterday or the day before on the Cloake Board Method of queen rearing. And I started watching that thing. I was actually on my way to work, and I'm like listening to it, kind of glancing down, and I'm like, man, this is really good. And you mentioned that you were from down in that Chipley area. And so I just thought you did a great job with it. Very fundamentally sound. I liked your simple and basic approach, and the fact that you cut out a few steps of the Cloake Board Method that really aren't necessary. According to the textbooks tell you to kind of turn the hive around when you do it and everything. You really can't do that on pallets. But the way you do it, I thought was very interesting. And so I'd encourage everyone in the chat, if you could go check out the channel, tell us about your channel a little bit, how long you've been doing it, what the name of it is. And so folks can go check it out. And I would recommend everyone, if you're interested in raising queens, just watch that video. Even if you don't use the Cloake Board Method, Matthew talks about a lot of interesting or really important principles with queen rearing in that video. That can really help you, I think, move you into success with queen rearing. So Matthew, tell us a little bit about your channel, how long you've been doing it, and kind of what your goals are with it.
Yeah, thanks. The name of the channel is Walk in the Woods Apiary Vlog. It's kind of a mouthful. The business is Walk in the Woods Apiary, and it's kind of a vlog, I guess. So it's just it's a mouthful to say out loud. I've been doing it less than a year, just a few months. I think it's I want to say I started like late last summer, last fall or something. It hasn't been that long, so I'm still getting used to editing. I never edited it or anything, so it's a little rough in my opinion sometimes, but I'm trying to make improvements. I kind of learn as I go, and as I'm getting feedback from the people that are watching it. And I also have a podcast that I do once a month called the Pollination Podcast. I've been doing that for over a year, and it's mostly was audio, but we just started adding some video elements as I'm learning to edit the videos. And the vlog I release once a week. I try to release one every Monday. I haven't missed one yet. And I just try to film like a day a week of what I'm doing so people can kind of see what it's like in the day in the life of a commercial beekeeper. And yeah, and just kind of show them the good and the bad and the ugly. Like if anybody saw the California videos, you know, where I hadn't slept in 3 days to put that first load together, you know, I was, you can see we get a little crazy after you get sleep deprived and the frustration that comes along with at least the California aspect of the business. It's pretty draining. I always tell people if I ever have a heart attack, it's going to be in like January from the stress. It's terrible, but it's kind of like a deal with the devil. You kind of have to do it just because it pays the bills, unfortunately, but it takes a toll.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, you know, I think we were telling you before the chat started that, you know, we have Brian on here, who's the hobby beekeeper up in Northeast Ohio. I'm of course the sideline, and then Greg is commercial. And Greg, why don't you guys each kind of share with Matthew here kind of what your goals are, a little bit about your own businesses and kind of what you're trying to do. And so Matthew gets to know you guys a little better, and then we'll kind of just open it up and start talking about bees and spring buildup, swarm splits, and whatever else it takes us. Brian, why don't you go ahead first? Or Greg, yeah. Either one of you, it doesn't matter.
Paper, rock, scissors, Brian. Ready? 1, 2, 3, shoot. Oh man. All right, one more time. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, shoot. Oh, okay. All right. Well, Matthew, thanks for joining us tonight. It's cool to have somebody with your expertise and experience kind of joining us tonight. And we're the kind of folks where we can learn from there's always something to learn from absolutely everybody. Things to do, things to try, hard lessons learned, you name it. So thanks for joining us tonight. Like Bruce said, we all kind of have our different, we're all walking a little different journey with the bees. And ours was something that kind of started as a homestead passion that quickly fleshed out to be a business. And then one thing has led to another. And we started off selling nukes and queens out of the side yard of the homestead, and the business grew, and we're slowly growing along with that. Rather than just go full on into bees, where we would, have to have some higher numbers. We're kind of diverse in what we do, and so we are selling. We're selling supplies. We're have been known for our wax tipped equipment, and then we sell some nukes, sell some queens, and we do some package runs. A lot of the things that are necessary to kind of keep the lights on too. But Bruce says that I'm commercial scale. I don't know that the number of colonies that I run. We don't get into the thousands. Maybe you would maybe call it professional or a business scale. I don't even know that it's necessarily its own category, but we have to right now keep our numbers around 400 or so, so we can continue to raise queens and sell nukes and be here for supplies and do all those things too. And as you're finding out, the YouTube and the podcast that we have, those things are just monsters, and they are always hungry, and they are always requiring more time than you have to give. So it's usually you're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're trying to rob time from other things to do. But we're based here in Ohio, one of the absolute worst places to, I think, do bees for a living, because it's just it's right in the roller coaster range, where like today it's in the 60s, and now it's going down in the 20s and 30s. And it's been like that all winter long, up, down, up, down, up, down. Really gives the bees a workout, and we have this non-existent late fall flow that's like rolling dice anymore. And so getting bees nutritionally squared away before winter comes, before they go dormant. I keep telling my wife we either need to go north or we need to go south, somewhere where it's at least somewhat more consistent, and we can try to plan and put something in place. But we're here in East Central Ohio, not too far away from Bryan, a couple hours away from Bryan. But that's kind of the elevator speech of what we do. And they just, one of those things that we threw everything against the wall about 10 years ago to see what would stick. And we got rid of the turkeys and the cows and the pigs and then all the things. And we're whittled down to raising bees. And then we have our own just, turkey, duck, chicken flock for our table. And then a lot of cats. I don't know if Matthew, if you have any good recipes for cats, but we can grow a lot of cats here. Got to figure out what in the world to do with those. But
Greg, there are representatives in Springfield, Ohio that can take care of that.
Oh, that's right. Oh, that's good. Bryan, tell Matthew a little bit about you.
Go ahead, Bryan.
I'm getting to dial it in.
Go ahead, Bryan.
Chicken chow mein. Here we go. Buckle up.
So a little bit about me. I started, let me see here. This will be my 9th season. So I started out just, my mom wanted to get a flow hive, believe it or not. So I just started researching it and looked into beekeeping. And I mean, it was like right there. It's like you're hooked, I started looking at just everything about honeybees, and I was like, man, this is really cool. So I started out with a package right along with my mom, and I'm still doing it. She's not, but I've always stayed like a hobbyist, or I've heard a lot of people now saying that hobbyist really isn't like the correct term. It's small scale, just because like the range, I think the most colonies I've ever had is 21. I've had like some issues in the last few years just with the loss, like what everybody has, but that's kind of like, I'm not looking into my beekeeping as like, it's not going to pay the bills and keep the lights on and, pay the house payment and all that kind of stuff, whatever. I just do it. It's a hobby that it kind of grew. And it grew to the point where, I had all these buckets of honey in the basement. And my wife was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. It's honey, So I started doing markets and just upgrading my equipment. And this year I do plan on, and it's kind of like a joke, and you'll probably see it into the chat. You'll see like hashtag Bryan 30, hashtag Bryan 50, whatever it is, because a little like 2 years ago, I said, oh, I'm never going to go over like 8 colonies. Then I had like 12 colonies. Then when I got up to 21, I realized that along with my 9 to 5 job, because I still work full time, that was too difficult. But the issue was I didn't look at like, when you go up to that level, then it's a hair different. It's not like with the hobbyist where you walk out and, you're sticking your arm out and letting the bees land on you and you're just, laughing because it's, it tickles or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a little different and you have to kind of focus on things, and no pun intended here, but you have to like dial in your operation. And having that experience, like this year, I do plan on I'd like to, by like the end of August or so in there, I'd like to be around 25 colonies. And the only reason why I want to expand now is, well, I've already told my wife, I'm like, look, instead of 1 day a week in the bees, I'm going to probably need 2 days, that way I can properly take care of them and manage them. But I want to grow to that point so that I can kind of, I can absorb the losses more, because when you're like me, I went into the winter with 8 and I lost 5. It's like now I have 3 and it's like, man, that's tough. So, but this year will be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm not looking at it like this was a failure, because I've spoken to a couple local bee clubs and things like that, and I tell them it's in these moments here where you're failing that you need to step back and just look at everything that you're doing and grow from it. And you'll end up being more successful than you ever thought that you would be, simply by looking at that moment and just adjusting, adapting, and moving forward. So, and that's why, I mean, like right now, if I had a 2 weeks ago, you could ask these guys, I'm like, man, I need to decide if I'm still going to be doing this. And, I was pretty down in the dumps, but now it's like, nah, I need more boxes. I got to keep it rolling. So
It's like an addiction.
yeah,
Matthew, I'm sure you've had those tough times
Oh, yeah.
in your beekeeping. So what do you do? How do you what do you do to overcome those difficult times of burnout or fatigue or failure? What do you do to overcome that?
Well, the burnout, I guess I'm just used to it because I've always kind of, even when I had a full-time job, I was running, when I was even at Barkman, we worked 60 plus hours a week over there, and I had 1,000 hives on the side. So burnout's has been part of my life, and they weren't run well. Let me tell you, I had 1,000 boxes with a couple bees coming in and out, but and we built up to that. That's what I found is like when you kind of hit that burnout stage, for me, if you can kind of get through it, in my experience, that becomes the new normal. It just becomes like you hit like a plateau where it's not stressful anymore. It's just like it's normal. And then when it's I notice that every time we try to increase, like we usually try to double our colonies every year and keep them alive, it would be terrible. I'd be under stress and I'd be upset, and it was just really rough. And and then once I hit that number, it was just normal. I didn't even think about it. And then the next year you double and it becomes rough. But the one thing, the failures, I totally agree with you. That was the best way to learn because I mean, that everything I've learned is pretty much because I've killed tons of colonies. I got really lucky because I worked on, I don't know, Sleeping Bear was running 8,000 hives when I was there, and Barkman was topping out at like 15,000 when I was there. So you just got like that raw bulk numbers, even though it's hard to focus on quality in a commercial operation at that scale. You're really just like power through hives. But just the raw numbers just kind of, I don't know, it starts building up like a muscle memory almost. And you get to see a lot of things. When you start running at scale, there's things you'll see when you're running 100 hives or 1,000 hives or whatever, you can't see when you're running 10 hives or 20 hives, just because there's so many variations in the beekeeping world, and it's hard to see a trend in that information. And the more numbers you run, you can start seeing a trend that's running through your whole apiary, because there's always an outlier, right? You always get that one hive that's obnoxiously strong or extra mean, or you've got that yard that was just extra bad for some reason. And if you've only got a small quantity of hives, it's just it doesn't give you the perspective that you get as you run more. So I think as you add more, you'll see more. And the one thing I'm anal about, I'll tell you, that helped me was I'm an avid note taker. I'm like super OCD about taking notes. I write down every time I go out in the field what I did, how the bees look, the weight, medication, mite washes, everything. I've got way too much. I have like literally Google Sheets, spreadsheets, pages and pages over the years. And at the end of the year, I just analyze all that information and I write down like the highlights. And I say, okay, hey, don't do this. This was stupid. Don't feed them solid corn syrup. Feed them 2-to-1, and or try 1-to-1 or whatever. And as you build up that information, you don't repeat that mistake. But I always tell people you have to write everything down, I think.
That's some good advice.
Mm-hmm.
There's a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson which says the following, and you hit it right on the head. You said, or he said, that which we persist in doing becomes easier to do, not that the nature of the thing has changed, but that our power to do so has increased.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's exactly what you mentioned there. You said when you first double your colonies, it's extremely difficult, a lot of fatigue, and you almost can't hardly do it. But then after you get used to it and you become more efficient and better at it, then that becomes your norm, and then you increase more.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, it's awesome to have you on here, and I'd like to encourage folks. We got a lot of people in the comments tonight. We appreciate you all being here. We've got so many. There's no way we can recognize everybody. I see a lot of names I recognize, and some maybe I don't. But we're glad you're all here, and hope you enjoy the chat tonight. Greg, did you have anything you wanted to ask? The topic tonight is spring buildup, swarms, and splits, but really, I guess overall the topic is kind of spring beekeeping, and that is so different in different parts of the country. Like those guys up there, these other two guys are kind of just trying to still kind of climb out of winter a little bit, just barely starting to get into the bees a little bit. And of course, we're down here, and we've already been. I noticed the video you made on you're raising queens. You're right in the starting end of raising queens, and so. Now, obviously, with you've got hives you've got a bunch of colonies out in California. What are you doing right now? And in order to develop the Cloake Board method that you're doing, you have to have a fair number of pretty strong colonies to be able to build those Cloake Boards the way you do. So what are you doing right now to prepare? What are you doing to build your colonies up? What are you doing with your bees that are here at home?
So I doubt they have this in Ohio because it's probably more of a southern thing, but we have something called spring tie here. It's our first major nectar flow. We can make a honey crop right now. It's kind of a swamp creek tree around here. I mean, it's Florida, so we're like 99% swamps, swamps and alligators. So it's pretty prevalent in our area. And so I've got, we've only got maybe a couple hundred colonies left down here. And almost all of them are shoved into a tie yard that I have, one of my really good yards. And they were runts. I mean, they were like not even 5-frame colonies. Maybe there were some 6-frame colonies because they couldn't go to California. So we'll overwinter like 3 frames, kind of my minimum population overwinter. So they're probably mostly 3, 4, 5s, maybe some 6s. And then they're just all sitting on the tie yard. So they should be building up. I did drive by some of the tie trees. Like, I don't know, it was almost a week ago and they were in full on bloom. So tomorrow I'm going to go check that yard. I haven't looked at it since the ties opened up, but they should be about bursting at the seams, I suspect. We'll find out. Some beekeepers make a honey crop. I just pull splits or shake bees or whatever from. So I'm lucky for that. But even the colonies that we have here at the house, that there's really not much going on at my farm. It's a very average location. There's nothing special about it. They're bringing in at least 3 or 4 types of different colored pollen that I can tell. I doubt they're bringing in nectar, but even if they are, I couldn't tell because I open feed all those Cloake Board colonies. I keep like a 2 parts water to 1 part sugar swimming pool basically out, those little blue kiddie pools. And so they're getting that on top of the pollen and they're building up pretty quickly. And that's about all I'm doing.
Greg, did you have anything you'd like to ask or talk about?
Yeah, Matthew, for folks who may not be, there's always more than one way to pluck the chicken. For folks who may not be aware of a Cloake Board use commercially, I think a lot of folks have used Cloake Board, and a lot of these things go way back. Cloake Boards, Snell Grove boards, Snell boards, used a bunch of different ways. Most folks know some of this is like maybe double screen boards modernly, but Matthew, as you set up your program and what works best for you, can you talk a little bit about, if folks aren't familiar, with the Cloake Board way of cell building. I know it's kind of hard to run some of these things through just verbally, but can you talk to us a little bit about the Cloake Board method and why you feel that that's a great choice to build cells?
Yeah, sure. Number one, it's a cheap piece of equipment. You can buy it on like Manlick or something for $50 and it pays for itself instantaneously. But it's just a queen excluder with a metal or not a with a wooden shim that goes around it that you'll stick in between a two-story colony. I like doing double deeps. That's how I do it. Just because you get an equal high population in both boxes. So it's just a queen excluder with a little bit of wooden shimming just to split the boxes apart, kind of like a double screen bottom board. And then the only thing difference is just got this, it's called a slide. It's just a metal slide. It's literally just a solid sheet of metal. And it slides like in and out like a tray right above the queen excluder. Like if you have your queen excluder here, you'll have this metal slide that'll just slide on top. And all that does is you have the queen down here in the bottom box running free, doing her thing. And when you run that slide across the queen excluder, it blocks the queen's pheromones and the worker bees that are carrying the queen's pheromones from moving into that second story top box, which puts it in a queenless state in a period of probably just a few hours, I think, if not even sooner. And then when you put your grafts, so if you're grafting larvae, you're sticking them in that top box with the slides in, it's going to act like a queenless colony, basically. So anybody who makes queen cells, and if they're used to making queen cells in a queenless starter, that's basically what it is. And that triggers that emergency cell response. So the worker bees under hyper stress, they think they're queenless, they think they're going to die. So they make a ton of cells. They don't really, it's not good for quality cells, but it's good for quantity of cells. And that's the cool thing with the Cloake Board is when you remove, after those cells have started, and I just do it the next day I come out there, I pull that slide back out and you still have the queen excluder still in place. So the queen can't get up there where the cells have started, but her pheromones will come back up there and the colony will reunite. And then that puts the hive in a supersedure state. And it creates not a supersedure state, but they start producing the queen cells under the supersedure response, which is a much slower, higher quality response. But the cool thing with honeybees, if they've started a queen cell, they'll finish it. And that's the downside with supersedure. It's only, if you have a supersedure cell in a hive, right, you usually have like one big fat queen cell in the center of the brood nest. You don't get like a dozen like you would under like a swarm impulse or an emergency impulse. So you can kind of trick the bees to make a lot of cells, but also finish them at the highest possible quality. And that's what is really nice with that Cloake Board. And then, of course, you don't have to have two colonies. And you can do that if you have two colonies, you have a queenless starter. A lot of people, myself included, you'll have like a 4-frame nuke. You put your grafts in the middle, no queen, and they'll do some nice cells in those too. And then, or you can take those cells after 24 hours in a queenless starter and then put them above a queen excluder of a strong colony, and they'll finish them as a supersedure response. That's your starter finisher hive. The Cloake Board is just both of those two hives combined into one. And the cool thing is, especially for people who aren't producing cells, commercially, like if you just need a few cells yourself, you get that Cloake Board, you throw it in between two double deeps, you do your grafts. As soon as the cells are capped, you take them out. And if you want to use that hive for honey production or splits or whatever you want, you just take the Cloake Board away and boom, you got your double deep back. No harm, no foul. You don't have to, put them in a queenless state and, or anything in particular that's going to harm them long term. It's really efficient and it's really productive. Now, the downside, if you're like me and you're running 10-frame double deeps, the Cloake Board has to be like obnoxiously strong to get those cells started. Whereas like if you make a 4-frame queenless nuke, it really doesn't take that many bees to get a bunch of cells started if anybody's done that. But with that Cloake Board, it has got to be boiling over with bees to get them to start. And in fact, we didn't get, I know you're going to bring up the video, but we got a really bad take on this first round of grafting, to be honest. I had to go back to all those 16 Cloake Boards on Monday and rebuild them, add more brood. I shook more bees in like I was doing on the video. And then I regrafted like 13 out of the 16 hives. It was very bad. And we still got a little bit of a bump in cell numbers, but it's still very low. And which I think it's a little early too, to be honest. Even our two of the strongest colonies that, in my opinion, were perfect for making cells, we only got like a 50% take on those, and the remaining ones were far less. So what I'm actually going to go do tomorrow is I'm going to go to that Tai location, and I'm going to pull some brood and make some queenless nukes. and I'm going to graft tomorrow just to try to keep our numbers up, right? Because we're already taking queen orders. I can't risk the cell production to be hampered. So I'm going to graft some cells in the queenless nukes. And then the next day, I'm going to take those grafts out, throw them above a queen excluder on my strong double deeps I have laying around here at the house. That'll still give me that super seizure, the super seizure option there. So that way I can still put out really good quality queens. And that's just, that's kind of how you have to do it. And it's usually that way the first round or two of grafting. It's usually not good when you start out. You don't really know what you're going to get until you try.
Mhm.
So, but
So,
you know,
a question for you. I've never raised any queens just because I used to travel for work a lot, and being 2 hours away from that yo-yo over there, I just pick up the phone and I'm like, hey, do you got some queens? I
Uh-huh.
drive down the street. I don't have to deal with shipping, anything like that. They don't travel by air or anything. They travel by car. I've been thinking about, trying to just raise some queens in the future. Just as I expand some things, I'm thinking, well, if I do get numbers into the 20s, raising, a couple queens probably will not be a bad idea, just because if I have some failures, things like that. With this cloak board, can you, like, if you take your double deep and you put the cloak board on, can you put, like, say, however many, like, frames of capped over brood, and then can you throw, like, a frame up there with very young larvae eggs and throw that divider, whatever you call it, in there, and will they build cells out on that frame?
Oh yeah, unfortunately they will. That's what got us here. We missed some. We put too much open brood in some of the top boxes, and they prefer theirs over ours, of course.
Yeah.
So I had to cut all those out. They will now harvesting them off a frame. It's that can be kind of tough. I find
Yeah.
than doing the grafts yourself. But yeah, 100%.
Huh. Well, because I've watched, and I got to point that way. I've watched that Joker over there. He's got this one special little knife, and I can't count the number of cells I've watched him cut off of frames. And he'll say,
Oh, nice.
okay, and he'll just have a whole handful of them. And okay, we're gonna put this one over here and put this one over here. And I never knew you could really do that. I was always like, years back, I was always like, queen cells, or you got to be so darn, it's like you're walking with the most fragile thing on the earth. And I never knew any of that stuff. And when Bruce sent the clip the other day, I was watching that and I'm like, oh my. It's like the light bulb was going off, and I'm like, man, I'm like so intrigued by this cloak board.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool. Yeah, if you can pop those cells out, they'll raise their own. It's no problem. It's a queenless hive at that point when the slide's in there. And then you take the slide out and boom, you get high top-notch cells. And
Yeah.
it just costs you one hive and a cloak board. And I mean, you sell 10 cells, the cloak board's paid for itself, done. And it's a
Wow.
worthwhile investment.
And so basically then too, like if you throw one dedicated frame in that they're going to build cells on, it's not like you really have to look all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking on that one frame then.
Yeah. Yeah, because when you build it, generally, the way I build it, and there's some
Ooh.
variations to it. I only put well, we try to, obviously we didn't do a great job,
Yeah.
but it's hard not to get a frame that doesn't have some eggs and larvae on it. But we try to build it with only solid cap brood, a couple frames of honey, and I always keep a big fat frame of pollen right up next to the grass for royal jelly production. And but yeah, I mean, you've always got to. I cut their cells out. That's what we do. We check them the next day after we put the slides in, and we kind of clip off any cells they're raising. We just kind of get rid of them. And then we put our grafts in. But yeah.
Interesting. Greg Burns, do you sell cloak boards?
Brian 50. Matter of fact, we're going to be wax dipping and have some HDO ones to fool around with too. Yeah. Yep.
Really?
Just for you, Brian. Brian 50. Come on, guys, help him out. Brian 50.
Hashtag 50. That's right.
I liked it.
Matthew, I got a question for you. And it's just like with any other cell starter, you have to, when I watched your video, and for those who haven't had a chance to watch it and may have joined us a little bit later, Matthew, Walk in the Woods Apiary vlog, I think that's what it's called, right?
It's a mouthful, yeah.
has his channel. He's down here from Chipley, Florida, and he produced a video he dropped a couple of days ago called the Cloake Board Method. Very, very simple. And of course, he's a commercial guy. And I guess you said, Matthew, runs 16 of those. And so you got a lot of sales going, over 700, I think, at a time, right? Is your goal each week.
Yeah,
Isn't that
we'll
correct?
get we'll do over 700 grafts. I usually expect to harvest 500-600 cells a week.
So
With that.
that's a lot. It's a very effective method and does a great job of explaining. But one thing I had a question about when you're setting those cell starters up or those cloak boards up. Now, did you pull brood from different colonies? The brood didn't all come from the bottom, did it? You just brought in brood from everywhere and just put it in that top box, right? Did you already put the cloak board in before you dropped that brood in there, or did you kind of let the bees mix a little bit and then put the slide in?
Yeah, so we yank out almost every frame or brood that the colony that has a cloak board on it can spare, and we'll move it up into that top box. I usually find it's not enough, or if it is enough brood, it's not enough bees, or it's not enough, you're usually short on one brood or bees, or sometimes both. So yeah, but when we move that up, we make sure the queen's in the bottom box. I go ahead and take the time to mark the queen, because sometimes she just slips out in the wrong spot, and if she's got a big, mark on her, it's easier to spot. It's worth that time, we found. So we just make sure that queen's down there and basically take all her brood up top and all the bees that we can spare without, risking her dying, or maybe leave just enough bees to take care of the open brood, because we do keep the open brood in the bottom box. But what I found is pretty necessary for the way we do it is to have about one support colony for every cloak board colony. So if we're grafting like we do with a double deep colony with a cloak board, I like to have one double deep colony as a support hive that's right next to it. And then we'll pull all the brood and bees from there. We just bought this, I guess it's like a really nice commercial grade shaker box we just got from California. And we shake the bee. I guess it's how people make packages. Greg probably does it, I guess. It's my first time seeing it, but we shake the bees in that metal funnel into like a cage. And we shake as many nurse bees as we can. And then I add those nurse bees also to the cloak board hive. And I also take all the brood I can, cat brood from the other colonies. So it's slammed. I mean, if you've got a 10 frame box, we have a frame for the grass, frame for pollen, 2 frames for honey. That leaves 6 frames for cat brood. That's what I want in that top box. And then we just shake bees and shake bees and shake bees until I can't hardly close the lid, without the bees knocking it off. That's kind of how you want it. What we found too is when we did it, this Saturday is when we rebuilt them. A lot of the bees did drift back to those support colonies, which were the older bees. I didn't want them anyways. But in the video, I'm like dumping bees with my little measuring cup and all the hives, and it looks very nice. A fraction of those stayed. So I had to go back on Monday and add more. And then I'm going to go shake more bees tomorrow and add to it. And that's how you do it. You don't build it one time and you're like, oh, it's good. It's like you build it and you add to it, you add to it, and you add to it until it's really primed up. And as we get deeper into spring too, the bees will generate their own brood a lot better. I mean, we're still kind of at the early start of the season for us. But yeah, to be really effective, I would have one support colony for the cloak board colony to really help juice your numbers up. If you're trying to pump out, 40, 45 cells a hive, if you're just grafting 10 cells, you may not need that.
Greg, have you ever used the cloak board method?
Indirectly. For a lot of times when we get in a little bit of trouble, I'm sure it would work fine. We tend to use a queenless starter, queen right finisher in doubles, using a double screen board and then an excluder. So it's similar, yet it's different. The cloak board I think would be great, like when we get into the season and get past the cool nights. The double screen board here is kind of handy because some of that heat is able to still go up into that top box. But there's zero reason why a cloak board wouldn't work. It's just like Matthew would say, it's a lot of it is preference, what you're used to. You build a rhythm, how many support colonies, because when folks hear these things, they may not understand is like for every cell builder or cell starter, like you've got several support or donor colonies that you're constantly bringing from if you do need to add brood, if you do need to shake some young bees into. But I definitely like the idea of it, and then there's obviously no reason why it wouldn't work. I learned I literally dialed in kind of what we're doing by spending some time with Bob and Chris Warner, and just saw how effective it was for them. And so that's what I based a lot of my routine on was that. But the name of the game, no matter what, is you got to have resources to support those starters, no matter which way you do it. And I think the queen right or the queenless starter, queen right finisher, like any of them, you can sometimes do those where they don't need any extra support, but there's a lot of back and forth that you have to do, and you've got to have several more than what you need just in case, because the weather changes, the bees change, and if you've got, like Matthew, if he's got, if he's expecting, 500 to 700 cells a week, I mean, you can't afford an oops, you can't afford the weather to quit and the bees give you 30%. Typically you maybe what do you bank on, Matthew? 50 to 70%, and then the extras you find homes or make splits.
Oh, you mean like what is the percentage on the cells that we get?
Yeah, yep.
Once we get them running, I try to budget for at least a 70% take. Once we get deeper into spring, we can get like 80, 90 on a good week. But there are weeks we get 50, but I would say on average we're probably steadily getting 70 over spring.
Matthew, what kind of genetics do you run, and do you find some genetics they get the memo like a week or 10 days before you do on pollen and nutrition availability?
Yeah, Italians to me. I'm an Italian guy. I like those. But we've just got a mutt, is what I just tell people. I prefer to say hybrid because it sounds better when you're selling it to a customer. But we've just mixed in, I buy queens from all kinds of breeders each year. This is actually our very first year we're selecting off our own stock only to graft off of. We usually buy some samples around the country and then mix that with ours. But I'm pretty happy with whatever it is that I have. I mean, it's working for me. I'm hitting my goals, so I'm satisfied, and most of the customers we sell to seem to be pretty happy. And yeah, that's it. I mean, and I got lucky when I worked for Sleeping Bear and I worked for Barkman. Those companies were so massive, they might order 1,000 queens a week or something and buy 500 from here, 500 from there. And I would take a sample home of all those queens and mix those into mine. So I have just got some kind of weird gene pool. I don't know what it is, but they're paying my bills. And they don't sting me too much, so I'm okay. But I do like the Italians for me just because they build up really fast. There was a point in time we were really heavy with the Carniolans, and I just didn't like them because I felt, for me going to California, like in mid-December, January, there would hardly be any brood in the colonies, and it would be bad for me. So I needed those Italians, and since we've kind of gone a little heavier in the Italian side, we can definitely have even 2-3 frames of brood all the way through winter. And usually the 3 brood colonies are the ones I can bank on going to California.
What's that do for your mite strategy, Matthew? Anything different? You really have to be on top of that?
You medicate 24/7, basically. I just have them on a perpetual amatraz drip, like an IV drip for all year round. It's that is bad. So you just have to stay on top of it.
A couple more quick questions about the Cloake Board, and then we may move on here. The same questions I had actually, so he can answer. Who you may have addressed it in your video, but I got to go back and watch it. So much good information. So the first question is, Bruce Brown says, "Do you use the same starter colony every week?"
Is that for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. We use the same 16 cell builders for the entirety of the year. We shut them down in like summer when we started to extract honey in like July. We kept the same colonies. However, we found, and I'm already finding it now, by us going in there and dumping all and mixing all those different bees from all the support colonies with the cell builder colonies and just tearing them apart every single week, the bees get hyper stressed out, and yeah, they get really mean. It got to the point so bad, I got embarrassed because customers were coming. The hives are behind the house. That's where we have our grafting barn at. So the house is blocking any flight path from those bees, and there's a lot of bushes. They were still like going around the house to the customers who were pulling up in the front yard to get queen cells. And of course, most of them are hobbyists, and they go, "Your bees are nice, right? They're not mean, right?" And then bam, bam, just tearing them up. So that was bad. I'm trying to find a solution. We're either going to have to move the colonies further away, which the girls actually do the majority of the grafting. I kind of showed them how to do it last year, and I'm letting them run. I just kind of help. I'm a gopher. I don't know. I go carry whatever they tell me to do. So we may have to move the colonies further away, and I don't know. We may have to get them like one of those little electric golf carts or something, because I hate them having to carry stuff so much. It's pretty hard on them. And or we're going to build some kind of privacy fence around them. I don't know, but anyways, that was to say was we're probably going to try. I got a tip from another breeder to rotate the cell builder colonies and give them a break. Maybe graft in them for a couple of weeks or a month, take the Cloake boards off and leave them alone and move them to another set, or even move those that are kind of getting burnt out away. So I will try that and see how if we get better results.
Okay, so here's another question, kind of a follow up, and this is kind of along the lines of what I was wondering. Do you have to reverse either box when using the Cloake board? What I was wondering is, you mentioned you rebuild them every week. When you say rebuild, do you pull brood up from the bottom? Do you bring more brood over from the other colonies? Because obviously, when you're building cells, that brood is going to emerge, and you're not going to have brood up there anymore, and the bees are going to start getting older. So how do you quote unquote rebuild them every week? What do you do?
Basically that we just make sure we have those 6 frames of brood, the pollen's still there, the honey's still there. We shake more nurse bees. We find frames open brood from the support colonies, shake over there. And if I would prefer to not take brood from the bottom box once they're initially set up, but in reality, sometimes the support colonies don't have enough to give me the results that I need, which I can probably just bring in more support colonies. And sometimes I do. Sometimes we will take brood from the bottom box and move it up top. But the goal for me is to have that box just beyond full of bees. And if I'm pulling brood from the bottom to the top,
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, you're eliminating that. But other than that, no, I don't do any reversing of the boxes at all.
Yeah, the metal slide is out most of the time, actually, right? So the bees are mixing between the two boxes. So they do the nurse bees can move up from the bottom box, and they can keep going up there until you slide it back in again.
It does.
Okay.
The downside is the queen's in that bottom box, and she's always laying. So the
That's
nurse
right.
bees are constantly being pulled down constantly. So that's why you got to re-add them or shake them. And you can put the slide in, and we'll do that. We'll take that top box off and just set it on the Cloake board with the slide underneath it. So it's kind of like a bottom board. And then we'll just shake all the bees from the bottom box into the back into the top box. And that re-adds those nurse bees that were being drawn down from the queen. And then you're not really adding more bees. You're just sort of forcing the population to move around yourself.
So you have to find the queen before you do that, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why we
yeah.
mark her. That's why I took half a day of work just to, this past weekend, because we had to find all the queens and mark them real heavy. And then you get that pays dividends for the rest of the year.
Okay. Good stuff, man. So I guess the bees, like you said, they can never really settle in. They always feel like they're in a constant state of, well, you mentioned the word stress, because you're always putting that divider in, and you're always shaking bees from other colonies, and you're just always trying to manipulate the bees. And so that was a question I had, is how do you actually replace the brood and keep that going? But you answered the question.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, Greg, did you have any more questions for him on that or on anything else? I know the topic tonight is spring buildup and splits. We've talked about spring buildup. Splits is kind of the next direction I'd like to go. Obviously, a question I would have, and Greg, you can chime in on this too, Brian, if you got any comments, but this is the thing that is so overwhelming to me, is if I'm going to make queens, what do I do with all the cells? How do I, as far as mated queens go, where do you put them all? How do you manage I know you say you sell queen cells, but you also sell mated queens. So how do you manage all those cells to getting them mated? What do you do to make sure you have plenty of drones and plenty of drone population, and just to get them all out into mating nukes? How do you manage that part of the process?
Oh, was that for me?
Yeah, that's for you both.
Oh, sorry, I heard Greg for some reason.
Well, I did.
Oh,
I like for both of you guys to chime in on this, but maybe you can start off, Matthew, and then Greg can chime in with any thoughts he has, because Greg does raise mated queens, and he'll tell you more about that in just a minute.
Yeah, I mean, we have incubators, obviously, so we can store the cells for about up to a week, usually after they're capped. If I have extra ones, usually in the start of spring, I can sell them. There are other cell producers around here, but there always seems to be a shortage. So I can just usually post on Facebook, and somebody will come by and grab most of them. If I have extra, I just double up, triple up. I've had to put 5 or 6 in a split sometimes, just because they were going to die anyways. It doesn't really improve the splitting success, in my opinion, but I just feel bad for them to die in the incubator. The mated queens, we use queen banks, so we'll bank them usually for up to a week at a time, and that's just kind of how we do it and try to get them sold.
how do you manage getting the cells mated though? Like, how do you set up your drones?
Mhm.
How do you get them mated actually? Because if you have, say you have 500 cells coming out and you sell 200 of them, you still got 300 queens you got to get mated. So how do you manage the process from the fully developed cell to the mated queen? How do you manage them making sure they get mated well?
Yeah, sure. So like our main mating nuke yard, which is here at the house, we're running those mini 3-frame styrofoam nukes. That's how we're using our queens, mating the queens. I've got a drone production yard about half a mile up the road. So we'll drop like 48 colonies there. I put those green drone frames in there so they'll raise drones. And then I've got another yard that I'll drop another 100, sometimes even more colonies if necessary, a little over a mile down the road. We'll also drop the drone frames in those. And then we have drone frames in all the cell builders too. And that's kind of it. You just want to have a lot of overlap. I mean, really, when you're mating queens, it's really imperative that you have outside bee yards that are just producing drones. Well, they're not just producing drones, but you want them to produce a lot of drones because the queens have just a natural instinct that's been built in through natural selection, I suppose, that they fly further and faster than drones from their own colonies. So your mating percentage will jump up quite a lot if you have yards that are half a mile, maybe even 2 miles might be pushing it, and those drones will come back and overlap to mate with those queens.
Awesome. Greg, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Matthew, on those 3-frame mini styros, what kind of queen cycle are you able to get? Are you able to keep a queen in there 14, 17 days? Can you get them to 21 days, or do you have to be pretty quick to get them in and out before they plug out those frames?
Yes and no. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, those things are tight. You cannot play around with those. There's not like, I'll get it tomorrow. It's like, no, if it's time and you get it today. So we harvest our queens at 21 days old. And when I say age, that's after the cell is hatched. So the queen has had about a week to lay. So you have cap worker brood. You can tell she's mated. And from what I've gathered from a lot of the research I've done, you get pretty good pheromone development at 3 weeks. If you can let her lay longer, you get better pheromone development, but there's always, as a commercial producer, you're kind of balancing quality and production. And so we settle on 3 weeks. You can pull, some guys will pull them at like 2 weeks old, but I refuse to do it because it's eggs. You don't know she's mated. And the few times I tested my own hives, I just had so many problems, super seizure, low queen acceptance. I just refused to do it. You cannot keep them, in my experience, beyond that 3-week mark. You have got to pull them when there's cat brood. The only time I found an exception is if I go take frames of cat brood out of that hive and give it an empty frame, and then maybe you're lucky. But sometimes the minis don't swarm so much as they abscond. They just straight up leave. You lose everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Do you find yourself having to move those resources, or you go in, harvest the queen? Are you right behind dropping the queen cell for the next cycle, or do you have to move? You have to pull a food frame out of there and add a fresh frame in each cycle, or are they able
generally. No. No, yeah, we'll cage the queens, and then at the end of the day, we come back and we add a fresh batch of cells as close to hatching as possible. Well, I mean, they can incubate the cell too. So, I mean, I've dropped them in there a week prior to hatching. They've been fine. But no, not typically. Now, if I have weak colonies that might die, like if they're 1 out of 3 frames, I will pull from the strong ones. But just to be fast, honestly, it's you pull the queens, you drop the cells, you move on. And I almost find it faster, instead of trying to move those little frames around, just go to one of my donor yards, like in my tie yard, for example, that's going to be strong. Take that shaker box I have and shake a bunch of bees, and then come back and just add another cup of bees to those colonies. We do a thumbtack system. So I'll put like a red thumbtack will mean, hey, I need another cup of bees. And as we cage the queens, we add the cells, I count all the pins. And then the next day I'd go collect bees if necessary and dump them into the minis that have that red pin. And that's kind of how we do it. Speed is like the name of the game when it comes to those things.
Right. So, but you don't find that you have to pull those when you're pulling and caging queens and dropping cells later that day. You don't find that you have to pull those little colonies back by removing bees from them. They're able to keep that pace at 21 days without being overcrowded.
Generally, no, I don't have to. But we run a lot. Like we're going to run 700 this year. I do expect some of those to swarm or abscond. I kind of budget for that loss that's going to happen. But again, it's kind of usually the queens when they're that young, they're going to have a slight deterrence to wanting to leave there anyways or swarm. There are some times when we're like say in May is like a really big peak springtime for us. We might do that effort, but it kind of depends. It really, to me, it just depends if I feel like I'm not going to be able to hit my queen numbers for that week or not. If I've got a bunch of orders, like if I'm back ordered, I'll put the extra effort in. But if we're producing a surplus of queens, I would rather just accept that I'm going to lose a few just to keep going and get to the next thing. So
yeah, makes sense. Time and efficiency is the name of the game at scale. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. Wow. So much to think about. We've already covered a lot.
Yeah.
Couple more questions on the queen rearing here. Let me see if I can find them. I got let's see. Okay, this is a reasonable question, especially as hot as it gets down here. Talking about the cell builder, I think, with that strong of a colony, any chance of overheating when the slide is in? Do you have any issues with overheating of the bees, or is the entrance on the cloak board sufficient?
That's a great question. I'm actually curious about that because what happened with us, and the reason we stopped using the those cloak boards last summer, which I think it was July, which we were extracting honey, but that was about half the answer. The other half of the answer is our grafts plummeted like significantly. Like we were hardly getting anything. We were dumping in hundreds of grafts and we were pulling out 50 cells or something. It's frustrating. And that during that time of year, the heat index here was like 120 degrees. It was brutal. So we actually bought a pop-up tent and put over those cell builder colonies. I posted online in some of the Facebook groups for the other breeders. There were some guys in like the hot states like Arizona. They were recommending setting up a sprinkler system, which I didn't go that far, but we did put them in the shade. And we even did break down some of the colonies so they didn't have such a high population. And I was still getting a terrible result. Now, part of the reason also for that happening is we were just kind of tipping into August. And August for us is like a massive dearth. There's no pollen, there's no nectar, there's nothing. And I'm not a pollen patty guy. I just don't like them. We have too many beetles here. So there was no protein coming in. So I'm kind of curious, was it the dearth? Was it the heat? I don't know. I'll tell you what I did do, and I may answer my own question, is I went back to using those 4-frame queenless nukes to start the cells in. And I put those suckers deep in the woods. Even though the beetles were bad on them, we had a lot of problems with beetles, I started getting some cells again. Not a lot, but enough just to kind of keep the queens working through. So yeah, the answer is maybe. I don't know. I'm going to try and test it this year because I've gotten better at running the cloak boards. Last year was the first year we started running like that many of them. So it was a learning curve. I'm going to try to take that knowledge I gained and apply it and see if we can't push past that summer. So basically ask me in August. And if I'm still using the cloaks, we're good. If not, if I go back to the queenless nukes, that's probably your answer.
Another kind of a follow-up question as far as the cells go. How do you transport your cells if you have to carry them, say 45 minutes to another yard to drop into splits? So if you got to carry them any length of time, how do you transport them?
I just have an incubator with an inverter plugs into the truck. That's it.
That's what I do too. Keep it at what, about 90 degrees, 92 degrees?
We'll keep ours
around 90,
but yeah.
Around 90. Yeah. When I went, I bought some, you mentioned Sleeping Bear used to work for them. I've bought some cells over to them, and she mentions you definitely don't want to get them too hot. They're a little bit cooler. It's not as big of a deal. Greg, I'm sure you would agree with that. If you burn them up, if you cook them, then they won't make it. But if they're a little bit cooler, it just may slow down their hatching a little bit, but it's not gonna kill them. Is that accurate? Would you say?
Yeah, I think most guys will target for 92.5, 92.7, 93, somewhere in that time frame, and just a hovabator or any kind of incubator that's DC, I think works out pretty good. I've got one. I don't know if it's not right here where I can reach. I might go up here and snag it. My incubator's right here, but I've got one by Apis Engineering, and it just looks like a little toolbox. Just folds over, styrofoam. It's cut out, and it just has a little plugs in 12 volt. Just a nice little neat. That one, you're only going to get like 40, 45 cells in that one. But if you need to carry, full cell bars of cells, something like a hovabator with the full cell bars just stacked in there, works out really good. I like to handle those things as little as possible. So if I can pull the whole graph bar off and go right into the incubator, I can, or set the frame in there. But if I pluck them off the cell bar and then set them in the protectors right in the actually, Brian has worked with me. I don't have one of those close by, but Brian's really helped me dial it in. I had some ideas on what I wanted out of cell trays, and so now I'll just literally harvest the cells off my bars and then line out these trays, and then those trays just slide right into my incubator, and it just makes that thing so incredibly easy. And then those trays now could go right into a hovabator and plug in and just. I mean, there are certain times, and Matthew could probably speak to that more elegantly, but there are certain times where you definitely don't want to be in there moving the cells, and there are other times where you can drop them on the floorboard of the truck, put them into a colony, and they hatch no problem. There's a fine line in there, but there's Matthew's probably the same thing on right around day 5-ish or so after grafting, or that moment when they're capped, they typically go into an incubator right then and there. And then just kind of cruise and kind of just camp out until the day before hatching, and then they get moved out to the yards and dropped. Typically.
Yeah, it blows me away that you have some people that actually ship queen cells with a high acceptance. I don't know how they do that. Those things, they must be tougher than you think if you can ship them. So, but it has to be done at the right time. If you do them, like you say, Greg, if you do it at the wrong time, it can destroy them, or the quality will go way down. So
you can get some banged up wings and some deformities and some if you're not careful, for sure.
There's a Stan Gore says, do you have a link for the hovabator? Is that what it's called? Is a hovabator, Greg?
Yeah, if you just put in if you just Google hovabator, chicken egg incubator, hovabator, it sounds fancier. It's just a rectangular styrofoam for like, what are they, $160 or so with the digital display. 170.
Okay.
What was it? Cutler Poultry.
Okay. Is it this one right here? Let me see. That
there she be.
Yeah, I've got one of those. Okay, so it's just a standard, like you buy those at a Tractor Supply Company or anywhere.
And you can get just about, Matthew, you can get almost 400 cells in that thing on full cell bars. You can almost get 10 of those 40s stacked all the way into there.
34. Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, it sounds about right.
More than you need, probably, Brian.
Yeah.
I don't know, Brian 400. Come on, guys. Hashtag Brian 400.
How do you hover? How do they hover in there though? Because there's like a screen on the bottom. How do you keep them from the bottoms of or the tips of the cells from?
I'll show you. Let's see.
Give me 1 second. Yeah, I do. You have a little rack you put them in.
Yeah, I'll show you. Give me a sec. I'll be right back.
Is that the type of incubator you use also, Matthew? Something kind of like that?
Yeah, it's a different brand, I think. I just buy like the cheapest one on Amazon. It's nothing fancy, but those little styrofoams are great. We the lady that works for us, Rachel, that does the cells, she recreated, she has like my wife does too, I guess. My wife recreates these like designs in a 3D program. Rachel's got one of those 3D printers. And so they printed this like really nice cell holder. It was like 50. Okay.
Yeah,
and that's how we do it.
Brian,
that's what I did for Greg.
Yeah. Oh, you printed one?
I've got printers there and I've got printers over there.
Man, those things are so cool. I was kind of skeptical, and I was like, a 3D printer, what is that? And then they started making bee stuff, and I was like, this is the best invention ever.
That's how I made this guy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, the Queenrite dials that I do, it's myself and Jason Crook. I 3D print all these.
Oh, that's handy.
So yeah, we do these like it's similar like the Hamby, and then it's got the different stages on there.
Queen ring. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like the queen calendars. Yeah,
we've got another one where you could put it on the front of like your hive body, and it's got 5 statuses on it. It's got like mated queen, and then it's got like if you saw a supersede cell, swarm cell, if you saw a virgin queen, or if there's no queen, no cell. So like post inspection, instead of having to like write notes or anything like that, you can just turn that dial on the front of your hive body. And then on the other side, we had the year of the queen, with actions down the middle, like you can inspect, feed, treat, whatever. But now, and I'm not giving it away. I know Jason's in here and he's probably like, don't you do it, Brian, don't you do it. But we have something new that is
You have
in
a
works.
you have a next generation.
That's right. So it makes it easy because, like now when you're getting to a guy like your scale, I mean, you have your system. For somebody like me, where, like I want to have 20 some hives, and typically, like even where I was at like 16, when I would look out at all of the front of the hives, if I saw any of my colonies that on the left-hand side, it wasn't at the green, that there was a mated queen, then I knew that was a colony that I had to do something with.
Yeah.
So just makes it easy. But yeah, I 3D print all that stuff.
That's awesome.
Greg, what you got for us?
So just, I mean, Matthew knows all about these. Some folks maybe have never seen them, but that'll hold, let's see, 46 cells. Let's see. There you go.
Wow.
And then you just use regular cell protectors, that they drop right in. And then you can set that, you can cut these to size to fit on the floor of your incubator, but those are styrofoam. It absorbs a lot of the shock. And truth be told, when you're pulling these, out of your regular cabinet incubator, whatever size that it is, I mean, they're hatching next day or maybe later on that day. So they're already so far advanced. I mean, going for a little bit of ride is not going to hurt them one bit. And then one of the cool things, one of my favorite ways to do this, I like, you go through this like evolution of dialing it in. See what I did there, Brian? You're constantly tuning up your program, and you're doing less of this and more of that. You keep moving in a certain direction, and handling something the least amount of times is just good practice on the farm. Why move the same pile of something 4 times if you can just put it where it belongs the first time? And so there are a lot of different versions of this, and there are some good ones out there. But I had some specific needs, and I got with Brian and let him know what I was looking for. And these particular ones, I can get 50 cells in this tray, 50 cells, and then I can stack these up in my incubator. And then these can go right on the floor of a hovabator, or they can go with me right out in the yard. So like if I'm going through a queen yard, I can just have a little cooler with me, and I put like some warm water bottles in there, and I can stack those in my cooler, take them with me. And as I'm going through a queen yard, I've got backups. And I've told the story before, but I had I had a line of bees of which will go nameless, but they were just they were full of just whiz and vinegar, and I got so upset with them. I went through and cracked all the lids, and I had 40 extra cells, and I just dropped cells in every single one of them, requeened that entire genetic line, and was done with that. So having cells is handy. Yeah, there's some steps. There are some serious timing and serious steps involved to do it. Anybody can make a queen, but not everybody can make a great queen. And not to deter anybody from doing it, but you'll find, like anything else, you start to dial in your process, everything from cell starter, nutrition, timing, age of the bees, like how Matthew mentioned, how stressed they are, have they gotten a break? All those things add up to cell quality. And you're never going to have a good queen if you don't have a good quality cell. You're never going to have a good quality cell unless you have a good quality cell builder. And so all these things just stack right up, and it takes a little bit. There's a learning curve to stacking up all of those little things. We say it all the time. Everyone is looking for the shortcut to becoming successful, and there are none. You may find a shortcut to finding a success in something, but you have to stack all of those successes over and over and over again, and then that's where the successful part comes. And so, yeah, cells are great, and I love making queens, and Matthew does too. But there are definitely some things you've got to get right from the very beginning, or the wheels fall off the bus. And here's the fun part: is it's different everywhere. What I can get by with, how long I can maybe graft, heat, temperatures, some of those things are different in all the areas, but we are all equally vulnerable to that and incoming nutrition. And those bees, they know that a week before we do. And they have a way of humbling us, especially those rounds where you're really pushing like I need 110% of the cells that I need to produce this week. And there's already a dearth in place, and the weather has already been telling the bees that, and they all of a sudden throttle way back. They let you know real quick, don't they? Don't they, Matthew?
Oh yeah, they'll break your heart.
Do you guys? So and I'm the rookie here. Even Bruce has even done some queens. So like I'm literally the only person here that has never raised any queens.
The smart one.
Would it hurt just to put like a little smidge bit? Now, like I know Matthew, you said you're not a fan of using pollen patties. Would it hurt like up here, like where I'm at? We don't have like, I kind of joke with Bruce because I'll do an inspection and I'll literally go through, like in the fall, I would go through all 8 of my colonies and I would see like 20 hive beetles, and that's counting them across all 8 colonies. And I'd text Bruce and I'd be like, Bruce, it's an infestation. I don't know how I'm going to handle this. It's horrible. It's the worst hive beetles ever. But would it hurt to throw, to throw like a little piece of like a pollen patty in there just so that they had that nutrition?
I guess Greg would probably answer that better. I guess he's in the same climate. Yeah.
I didn't hear the first part. You're trying to feed the hive beetles?
Like
what are you
no.
For a cell starter?
Like when you're raising, like for this cloak board, if you are going to set it up, would it hurt? Like, I know you want to have it all packed out and everybody's saying good nutrition, everything like that. Would it hurt to throw a smidge, like strip, not a huge clump of it, but just a little bit of?
You're talking putting a pollen patty or putting protein on your cell starter?
Putting a pollen patty in there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Matthew, I don't know how he does it, but a lot of folks, it depends on how juicy your starters are. Sometimes you got to keep thin syrup in the cell starter and a pollen patty if that's what your climate and your incoming looks like. And if you're able to get another 10% take and you're getting into the upper 90 takes and the cell, you can start to quickly tell by the quality of the wax on the cell, the quality of the royal jelly, how much royal jelly. You don't want. Everyone says, the bigger the cell, the higher quality the queen. That is not the case. You've got I've seen these big queen cells that are this long, and you get so early on, you get so excited thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to be a phenomenal queen. And you get in there, and there's this dead, tiny little larvae all shriveled up, and there's 8 pounds of royal jelly in that thing. You quickly just get, you learn and get clued in onto how important nutrition is. And gosh, this has been an incredible year. Brian's telling me to dial it back. Yeah, don't get me going. I could go on and on. It's a whole thing. Queen rearing is not beekeeping. Queen rearing is a completely different art form outside of beekeeping. It's completely different. The grafting and the queen rearing, the only thing that it has to do with bees is that you're using bees in the bees timeline. But there are so many other fundamentals that are way outside of that. It's just like, this queen station for artificial insemination. That's not even beekeeping. It's a completely different thing. All these things are completely different than the actual beekeeping part, but where they're common, where the common ground and where they're similar, there is an art form to every single one of those. And I think that's why some of us we're drawn to it and you love it. There's a certain art form to the cell builder. There's an art form to incubating. There's an art form to virgin queens, and all these things are all a little bit different, but they're not exactly beekeeping, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think in any part of beekeeping, it doesn't hurt to feed. Unless you're trying, if you feed when you don't want them to grow, when you stimulate them when you don't have to, then that's an issue. But as far as I think, Brian, it couldn't hurt to ever add nutrition to those cells to make those cells. I think if you can, but like Matthew was saying earlier, down here we have a good pollen. Like they're bringing in pollen most of the year. There is a short time of dearth, and it gets weird in the summertime, but like right now and even in the wintertime, sometimes they find it, I don't know where from, but they find it right where I'm at. So, but up there, I think I know a lot of people do add a little piece of pollen patty or pollen sub, as well as the syrup as they make their queens, especially early, probably. I'd like to kind of shift a little bit. We've talked a lot about queen rearing, which obviously, in order to make splits, you have to have a queen. And there's so many different ways to do splits. And Stan Gord at Texas Friendly Beekeepers has a question. I know that a lot of my splits over the years have basically been either a walkaway or a version of a walkaway split. And he asked the question, talk about walkaway splits compared to using cells from a breeder. Do you have any thoughts on that? I'm sure you probably do. I know Greg, but we all probably have a thought on that. But Matthew, what's your opinion on that? I've had some really nice queens from walkaway splits, and I've had some that were duds, but that can happen with cells too. So what are your thoughts on walkaway splits?
Yeah, I think they work great. For the first few years we were in business, I didn't know how to raise cells, and I couldn't afford to buy cells, and I definitely couldn't afford to buy queens. So that's all we did. We used to do hundreds of walkaway splits, and I think we still got a pretty good take. I want to say in spring, I was still getting like a 70% success rate on them as long as they were strong enough. That's the key because, right, it takes an entire month for them to make a new queen for it to start laying. And then you've got, 3 weeks until you have the new generation on top of that to hatch out. So that's like 7 weeks, if I did my math right, before by the time you crack that hive in half or whatever. And then you've got a fresh generation coming out. And if you think the average lifespan of a bee is like 6 weeks, give or take, you're going to see a tremendous die off of the original population in a walkaway split by the time you get that fresh generation hatching. So it's really imperative in a walkaway split. It's got to be very strong, and you want to have extra brood. You don't want to do a walkaway split with one frame of brood, right? It's probably just not going to make it. If you've got a queen cell that's about to hatch, then you can have a laying queen in 2 weeks. It's going to be a lot better, and it's going to shave down your timeline. Instead of a 7 weeks before you have a fresh generation, you'll have 5 weeks before you have a fresh generation. So you can make your split a little smaller. And of course, if you're in a honey flow period that may only be a few weeks or a month or whatever long, that can be a lot in production that you're losing or gaining by adding or losing a couple of weeks in that timeline.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Greg, what do you think about walkaway splits? I used to hear, you hear all kinds of things, but one thing I've heard in the past is that if you do a walkaway splits, I've heard emergency queens are not as good as grafted queens, or obviously swarm cells, I think, are probably the best, the ideal. And I know also, like you mentioned earlier, Matthew, supersedure cells, the bees, they're doing that intentionally. And so supersedure cells are really good too. But, I've had good success with some walkaway splits in the past. Greg, what do you think about quality between the two? Matthew makes good points about timing, but what about the quality of the queens?
Yes, no, maybe. I think the question the answer everybody hates. It depends.
Mhm.
I can 100% vouch for the little queen that you say couldn't ends up being the one that's phenomenal. Sometimes we have an idea, and let's be honest. I mean, we go through and we're grafting into these little plastic cells or plastic cups, and we're going in and we're looking at the right size larvae. If you can see it, it's too big. You're going for the one you can barely see, a beautiful jelly bed, and you're placing that by not flipping it, and then you're putting it into a cell starter. It has to have all these things. Their mind made up that they want to do it. They've got to have nutrition. It has to be the right, all these things, right? And can we make quality queens? Absolutely. But I still, this is me, I still believe that the queens that the bees make, it's in their own nutrition, their own time, everything, right? It's literally every aspect of them doing it. Are we going to be able to pull 700 of those? No. But I don't think people should write off emergency or supersedure cells. Case in point would be the monster hive this year. This thing was over 8 feet tall, over 300 pounds of honey in it. And it was literally, it was Matthew would appreciate it, is sometimes your cell starters, they just tire out. They tire out, they don't take. And then after you strip your material out of there, sometimes they'll make their own queen cell. And they do that, and I forgot about it. She hatched. I picked up that colony. It was a little dink of nothing. Moved it off into the corner of the barnyard there. Totally forgot about it. It grew, did its thing, made it through, never treated that first year, made it through the second year, sort of forgot about it. She grew up, forgot about her again, didn't treat her. And then in that third year, she was my garbage disposal. Like when I was going through cleaning up dead outs, a box of drawn comb would go on her. I'd go in there, crack the lid. Oh my gosh, they're in the top. So they can surprise you. Don't write it off. However, I would say this, and Matthew said it great. It's a timing thing. I look at all these as units. They're all assets, and you're investing, right? So here is a unit, which is this box of bees, and you can either do a walkaway split, or you can help this thing along. They're all units. So imagine we're taking $10 and we're investing it, and let's say we're taking it to the bank and investing it, right? A walkaway split is something that you're going to get a 1% interest rate on that $10 over the course of that term of that investment. Whereas if you take that same unit, that same $10, but you drop a queen cell in there, now you've gone up to like a 6 or 7% return. If you drop a mated queen into that split scenario, now you're at like a 30% return. It's all based on time, and how fast that they will actually start to produce more assets within itself. Walkaway splits, do they work? They absolutely work. But the problem is, just like Matthew said, you're at least 2, sometimes 3 weeks behind on brood, and you end up timing out. You end up going through this really sensitive phase where all the field force is dead, and now the whole entire colony is solely relying on nurse bees, or bees that are barely old enough to get out and do anything in the field. And then you've got this colony who's living hand to mouth. They don't really grow. They're waiting for bees to be mature enough to go out and bring and come back for them to get to that next level. Right now, you jump to the split that has the queen cell. You just gain 12 days at a minimum, depending on the stage of the last one. 12 to 16 days, they're already ahead. So now when she hatches, the field force is ready to go. There'll be a brood force that's ready to step into all those roles. And there's huge gains on that. You drop a mated queen in the split. I mean, and there's it just takes sort of time to get out of the candy, them to accept, maybe to get a couple things squared away. And now she's really rocking and rolling. So they all work. It's how great of a return do you want on your investment? Folks say, well, I don't want to spend the $40 on the queen. Okay. How much is a frame of brood worth to you? Right? That's huge, and that makes a big deal. But Bruce, don't get me fired up talking about queens. I'm just going to keep derailing. Short stories long. So yes, they will make their queens. A lot of times they're going to be better than the queens that you make. But think of these splitting opportunities as investments. What kind of return do you want on this investment?
Yeah, I think with walkaway splits, the resources are very important. The resources are always important. If it's right in the middle of a honey flow with the bee, the bees are buzzing, the birds are chirping, the flowers are blooming, everybody's happy, they have plenty of nutrition coming in, they'll make a really nice queen out of those. But if it's almost like an emergency situation in a bad time of the year, you might end up with queen, but she's not going to be the same. Just like when you are doing cells, same type thing. They have to make them. When you're trying to graft in a bad time of the year, they don't even accept those cells. But emergency cells, they got to make a queen. So those queens might be kind of puny, and they'll replace them lots of times as soon as they can. But yeah, if the resources are good, I've had real good success with walkaway splits. But all these things are valid, and I know. I guess you can manipulate the brood as well a little bit if you want to with walkaway splits, to where you have a lot of brood with the new queen, and so some of those bees may not time out completely, but still, there's all those things to consider. We're going to address another couple of quick questions.
Quick.
I'll
be quiet.
Quick questions. About, and this is a good question. Couple of good questions here, and then I want to move on to the other part of the. We've started in on the splits a little bit, but I want to move to swarms and splits a little bit more. This is a quick question here. Actually, is queens. 21st Bee says, I'm lazy. I artificially swarm a queen. Let the old hive make like 40 queen cells, then cut out queens and spread them amongst my many nukes and let them hatch and go mate. I hate grafting. You can do it that way, Greg. That's exactly what you've talked about doing before in here, and that's one way to do it. If you want to cut them out, that works out well. And I think one thing about that is the bees will choose. They'll choose maybe the cells or the larvae that are at the ideal age if they're in there. So I think that's not a bad thing to do. And then maybe Matthew, if you could address this question right here. Can you explain how you make your queen banks and how long you keep the banked queens in there? This is from Dominican Beekeeper.
Yeah, so I'm fond of a queen bank, which some people prefer a queenless one. So I generally will have either a double deep or a triple deep. Actually, yeah, it's usually a double deep, really, with a free roaming queen in the bottom, really strong, obviously super strong. Queen excluder on the top of the 2-story, and then I'll put a 3rd-story box. And I basically just build like a modified version of the Cloake Board Super. I still have a frame of pollen where I have the queens caged in my banking frame. I'll have a couple frames of honey. The only difference is instead of having cat brood up there with the queens, I have open brood up there with the queens because you actually want to draw the nurse bees up around where all the queens are banked, and they'll maintain and take care of those queens. And that's pretty much how we do it. I try to not do long-term queen banking, just because I found in my experience, if I try to push past 2 weeks, I have really high mortality rate. So we really try to keep it like first in, first out. We cage queens once a week. So I try to go, okay, if I'm adding these new batch of queens in, I have to take the old batch of queens out. And either, I'll try to sell them, or we'll offer free shipping or something just to get them out of there. I'll start requeening hives. You'll go out there and start pinching old queens. That's how we're able to requeen a lot of our we try to requeen everything every year, more or less, kind of, sort of, when I can. And that's how we do it. I generally find I don't have a very high mortality rate as long as I stay within about a week time frame with a queen bank. And I personally, in my opinion, I actually think it's better. Some people hate queen banking, and I used to too when I started. But I found as I've started selling queens to customers and I got the feedback, I find short-term queen banking is actually better for the customer, because what's going to happen is if you put up a queen up in that queen bank that's got an issue, she's not producing a lot of pheromones, maybe something you and I can't detect as a breeder, the worker bees will not take care of her, especially if you've got 100 queens up there that are caged, which is how I usually do it. They'll find the ones that are kind of dinks, they'll stop taking care of them. And after about 3 days, those queens will be dead. And I would much rather have those queens die in my queen bank than, in the car with the customer when they're driving to their hive. And ever since we've started queen banking, I've had a lot less complaints about queens dying with customers. So that's how I do it.
That's interesting. Greg, what do you do about queen banking? Do you do a lot of that, or do you mostly get them right in the colonies?
Just at the scale that we're operating in, it's definitely, you can see the handwriting on the wall, because if you can only cage so many queens in the morning before you take them to UPS that evening, right? And it's handy. I can see the benefit of knowing that I've got 100 queens in this bank and I've got an order for 94. We're good. I've got 6 extra. I'll find a home. So that would create a lot less heartburn when it comes to getting queen orders out. We do banking, but it's a little bit really kind of it sort of is banking, but it's more so for virgins that will just ones that we are prepping for maybe insemination just to get those. So not the same, but sort of similar. I think queen banking, for the reasons Matthew just lined out, I think I see nothing wrong with that. Especially if you can call out some of the ones that you can't see, just because a queen is laying. And this kind of goes where, boy, never mind. I'm going to be careful what I say here, because I'll get myself in trouble sometimes, Matthew. But there are folks that are operating at all different scales with all different kind of goals and all different kind of experiences. And just because a queen is running on a frame and you see some eggs on that frame does not mean that she is a quality queen or a queen that you would want to buy for yourself. And so sometimes by letting them lay 21 days or longer helps flesh that part out. I can see by putting into a bank for 7 days or less, those queens that are on that fringe who are just barely hanging on, like they will call, they won't even tend to. And I can see a benefit, not having that one queen get to a customer, especially if they ordered. I don't know, Matthew, do you ship small numbers of queens, or do you have a minimum?
We have a 4 minimum, but other than that, I'm happy to get them gone.
So like if a customer has ordered 4 and they happen to got 2 dinks in there, now you've got a customer who was planning for 4 splits, whatever that they were doing, and you still have to make it right. So now you're sending 2 or 3 more queens overnight to the customer. That just cost you $100 in shipping. It just cost you 2 queens that maybe you do or you didn't have. So if you can do things to minimize potential loss, and then that's the best you can do. And sometimes there's just things that are outside of our controls that happen too. But again, see, short story long, I'm thinking slow, just tighten it up here. And that was already a 3 minute. Was that a rebuttal?
That's fine. That's fine. So, guys, I just looked up here at the time, and we've been going for an hour and 36 minutes. Matthew, that's what
We just got
happened.
started.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah.
We just got
I was
started.
talking to Matthew last night, and he said, "Man, I don't have any problems talking about bees, and none of us do. That's the beauty of this whole thing, and everybody in the comments enjoys talking about bees too. So that's how this thing keeps rocking and rolling for year after year." Last question, I think we'll take on the Cloake Board Method. One last question here. In the Cloake Board Method, you put the queen excluder in for 4 days before putting the cloak board in. I think you do it pretty much right away, don't you, Matthew? When you make the double, when you get them ready, how do you leave the cloak board in there for a few days, or wait a second? Do you put the queen excluder in for a few days, or how long do you leave the queen excluder in before putting the slide in?
I think what they mean, the queen excluder is on all the time between the two colonies. That's the cloak. The slide now I put in the day prior to putting the grafts in.
Okay.
That way they're in a queenless state when I put the grafts in the next day.
Yeah. Okay.
That answers the question.
That makes sense. And for those who may not have been here earlier, and I'm not sure if we talked about this real closely, but the textbook way of doing the cloak board, originally they spin the entire colony around, so it's 180 degrees facing backwards, and they seal the bottom, and then they put the cloak board in facing the front. So the bees, it's real complex. But for those who may not have been in here, when Matthew a couple of days ago he dropped a video. That's kind of how I found Matthew on YouTube. Once again, it's Walk in the Woods Apiary vlog and Matthew's channel. And I think if you just go into YouTube right now and type in the Cloake Board Method, his video will pop up probably near the top. It's really because he just posted it and it's getting a lot of views. And so he talks about how he does it on a commercial scale, and you don't do all that fancy stuff. The main entrance to the colony, the bottom box is facing forward. The cloak board, the second is facing forward. Then the top box is facing forward. And the bees just kind of figure it out. But you do supplement almost as if you're making a cell builder, but the cloak board just makes it easier to manage. And so we talked a lot about that at the beginning of the video too. If you want to go back and watch that, I'd encourage you to do it. But I guess the next question is, we've already talked a little bit about splits. We talked about walkaway splits. There's so many, we could go through probably 40 different ways to do splits. There's so many ways to do it. Matthew, do you have a preferred way of doing splits? I know depending on what your goals are with your splits at the time of the year, you probably do them differently, but what is your preferred method? Like, say right now the hives come back from California, you're going to just be busting splits out and increasing. How do you typically do that? What is your method, and what have you found to be most efficient?
I'm going to do it a little different this year just because we're going to try to boost numbers heavy. My general split for me is 3 brood, 2 honey. That's all I get. 3 brood, 2 honey, and a queen cell. That to me is perfect in my opinion. But when these bees come back from California, and we've got a mix of double deeps and hive and a halves, I despise splitting the hive and a halves because I hate that medium is always in the way. But the double deeps, which is what I prefer to run, what I'm going to do is usually they'll come back with 8, 10 frames of brood, something like that. So I'll usually pull 2 5-frame nukes out of that double deep, which will break it back down into a single. So I'll have 2 of the 5-frame nuke boxes. We use those little corrugated plastic ones. And I'll do 3 brood, 2 honey, boom, boom. There's 2 nukes. I can sell those up. We used to just sell those to customers, but now I'm going to reinvest it this year. And then I've got a really fat single down there. Usually there's still 2 or 3 frames of brood in that single still. Plus there's a queen running around in there, right? So what I'll do is I'll pull, I'll still have the deep box, and I'll yank up like 5 frames from the bottom box, put it in the deep box. So you still got, it looks like a double deep from the top, but you've only got 5 frames, in the top box and 5 in the bottom, and you've got 5 of empty space, and I'll throw an empty comb or foundation or whatever I've got. And then I just crack that thing in half and make 2 singles out of it. And I drop a cell in both. I don't even look for the queen. I drop a cell in both boxes and I'm done. And I move those away. If that makes sense. So it's kind of like I almost do like a modified walkaway split with a double. In some years when I get behind, and I used to do this when I worked full time, I would go to the double deeps. I'd crack them in half. I just throw a queen cell on both sides, just eat a queen cell, and then you have 2 really beautiful singles. And I throw an excluder and a honey super and put them on honey flow, and I'm done.
Yeah, I call those blind splits where you do that. And the thing about the cells is sometimes I think, and I don't know, Greg, how you feel about this, but if you drop a cell in both colonies, if that queen is getting older, if she's failing in whatever way, sometimes that virgin will emerge and just take her out, won't she? If you drop her in there at the right time. I've heard that the virgin will go in there and just take care of the older queen if she needs to be taken care of, and she'll go ahead and get mated and take over that colony. And I think that's happened quite a bit in some of mine in the past that I've split that way. But just a blind split where you just make sure you got resources in both colonies and split them right down the middle and just drop it even on a pallet next door. Make sure it's got plenty of bees and resources, and they do well that way. I've had good success with that. I did that last year, actually. I got a bunch of cells from Sleeping Bear, and we did that with a bunch of those. Now, the acceptance wasn't that good. I'm not sure why last year when I did that. It may have been a little early in the season for queen cells. I'm not sure, but in the past, I've had real good success doing that. The previous year, I think I had a real good success rate. So that makes sense, and I think that's how a lot of the commercial guys do it. They don't have time to look for the queen. They don't have time to shake them all beneath the queen excluder. They don't have time. They just got to move fast. And I guess you probably learned those techniques when you were working with those big outfits that have 15,000 colonies. I mean, you can't just be taking time to look for stuff. You got to get it done.
Yep.
Wow, man. So we've talked about,
and Matthew, I haven't said it yet, but that's why every time I go down and I visit Greg, he always, like the first few times I went down, he was good, and he'd be like, "Oh, is there something you want to see?" Or, and I'm like, "Well, what were you planning on doing?" And the one day, what were you doing? Putting on what, Apagard or that's in the tub. I'm like, yeah, let's go do it, And I just want to hang out with the bees, and literally, I mean, we could even build a wall. We could build a wall.
Hang out with the bees. That's what he said.
That's it, But like every time though I leave, I look at him and I'm like, this is why I'll never be a commercial beekeeper.
It's work.
I'm never going to be like this.
Yeah.
Got to be efficient. It's work. Yeah, for sure.
Because there are those moments where, I mean, I'll just go out and sit. I have a plastic lawn chair that it's probably been in my apiary. Oh gosh, it's been out there probably 5 or 6 years now. And I literally just plant it in between two of my hives and just sit there and I just watch them.
Yeah.
Now, if I had, like Bruce, even at Bruce's scale, if I had 150 colonies, I couldn't do that.
Well, you still have to take time to do that because there is still something extremely special about doing that. It might not be a dedicated chair, but you might take a box and turn it over and just sit there, because sometimes it doesn't matter. Even if we're running, 200 miles an hour down a dead end street, it's important, no matter the scale, to take the time to just get yourself right. And I don't think there's any better way to take the time. For me, it's to put the box out there, focus on the bees, pray, get myself right. And then that makes a huge difference with your relationship with the bees, is when you take the time to get yourself right. But the thing, as you're kind of outlining this out, there's a time in all of our journeys where you would say, I'm going to make a split, but I'm going to go find that queen, right? And I'm going to go pull a little nuke off of her and put that off to the side, because you're building numbers, because you want to save every queen who has a potential. And then eventually it goes to the point to where where your breeder queens are. Those are the ones that you baby. Those are the ones that where they're at. Everything else is just a proven daughter, and you're just dropping cells as quickly as you can and moving on and moving on and moving on. But something happens. And when you turn that corner and you make that change, it's both a blessing and a curse, because you start to think about efficiency in every rotation of your elbow and shoulder and leg and where you stand and how you sit. And you learn you can't work singles from the standing position all day long for 7 days a week for months on end. Like, there's things that you can and you can't do. One thing you can't do is you can never go back. I shouldn't say you can't. I personally have not been able to go back to what it was like. That feeling and that connection that you had when you had just 4 or 5 colonies. You can't dial it back and go to that, because once you turn that corner, you're always thinking about increase. You're always thinking about moving. You're always thinking about growing. You're always thinking about what can I do? What can I do? When you know what you're able to do, what the bees are able to do, there's something about that. It's hard to dial that back in. And I don't know that I can ever go back. And I wish I could sometimes go back to when it was like the mystery of having 4 colonies and just being in love with all 4 queens and every single laying pattern, and knowing all the detail and the nuance to that. I don't know that you can ever regain that once you lose it.
Mhm.
That's true. And I think probably my favorite time, when I'm working the bees, I love it, but I love it in the bee yard. I'm sure all of you guys have experienced this, Matthew and Greg and Brian. It's late in the evening. There's kind of the sun's kind of starting to go down over there over the trees. And, a lot of my bees are in areas where there's water. It's just really pretty. And I just love to kind of hang out there a little bit. It's cooler. I'm tired from a hard day's work. And that's one of my favorite times with the bees. Of course, the other time is when I first get there and the bees are flying and they're not mad at me yet. They're just they're all happy and they just kind of ignore you. But I really like it kind of when everything's calmed down, you get the truck loaded up, the smoker is put out, and just walk around and just kind of, I don't do a lot of sitting and watching the bees much, but I do walk around them. And I just love just kind of hanging out there for just a few minutes, and just kind of enjoying not just the bees, but everything else that's going on around with the, the birds flying and the different little animals, wildlife you might see, and then the bees, of course. And there's just a sense of satisfaction that comes with that, of being one with the whole process.
I got a complaint here that I need to file with a representative of Nature's Image Farm, because when I've been down there, and I already know how this is going to go, because I was standing up on top of a hive the one time and I get shoved off, almost injured, horrible, but I've never been instructed how to stand, how to twist, it was like an ocean nightmare. I was just, it's like I'm a train wreck when I walk out into his yard.
It's like you've never been to a learning yard, Brian. Come on, bro.
I was never set on the correct path.
As this is actually going to sound ridiculous. I'm trying to figure out how we actually make this happen. But you actually reminded me of something. I would like to be able to offer this. I know this might sound silly, right? Because once you know how to do what you do, you take it for granted. But like a lot of us don't remember, when we were wanting to ride that 2-wheel bike, right? And you got the training wheels off, right? Those moments leading up, we can maybe remember a little bit, like you saw a BMX bike and there's this kid doing jumps and it was a 2-wheel bike and you're thinking, man, I can't wait till I do that. Here you got your little Star Wars bike and it's got the training wheels on there and you look like a nerd, right? Everyone else is doing all the cool stuff and all you want to do is take the wheels off so you could just be like them and it looks so much fun, right? And then eventually, the wheels come off, right? You might be going and all of a sudden you lean too hard and one of them broke off and you didn't know it. Next thing you know, you're pedaling and you're, whoa, here I am. We forget what that was like with our beekeeping journey. And there are so many folks who are they're just putting the training wheels on. They're just trying to get the training wheels off, right? Meanwhile, we've got motors and jumps and half pipes and you name it, right? So one of the things that I thought that I would try to do, and I don't know if I can do it this year or not, but I would like to be able to set up like some private learning sessions where it's one-on-one, where you can take the time and say, okay, here's why I stand like this. Silly as it sounds, here's why I stand like this. Here's how we actually go through some of these fine motor things, like not setting ourselves up with booby traps, working in a methodical, consistent motion, being intentional with all the things that we do, having a game plan, go through the hive in a meticulous way with purpose, with intent, get through, we take that for granted because that's just, we have to do those things. But there was a time, if you guys try to remember, where you struggled to light a smoker and you struggled to get the bee suit on and you struggled to get out there and not get hot and not get anxious and not get worked up. There was a time when you were trying to figure out the best way to crack the lid open and actually work through your hive to try to understand, what am I actually looking at? What is all this stuff? What do I do with it? How do I take care of them? Like there was a point in time where we were all at that point of the journey and we forget about that. And I think it's important to remember that there are folks who need somebody there to help walk them through those early steps. But anyways, I'm going to slow down because I'll just keep going, Bruce. That's just what I do.
Okay, so we've addressed spring buildup. We've talked about splits. We've talked a lot about actually queen rearing, which I may add that to the title because I think that was really phenomenal.
Yeah.
I appreciate you both. You and both you guys for talking about that a little bit. Brian and me are still trying to figure that out a little bit, but really good stuff tonight. Swarms we may save for another chat. We're kind of getting up on time here, but just as we kind of begin to wrap it up, Matthew, do you have any methods that you use to prevent swarms? Is it mainly just splitting beehives? Do you worry about that? Do you catch swarms? If you walk in the bee yard and you see 3 swarms hanging in trees, do you worry about them? You just let them go. What do you do? I know commercial beekeepers don't worry about swarms much.
I don't even care anymore. I just don't. I don't even. I don't. Doesn't even matter. If they're like, honestly, if I've got an empty box and they're like, I can just shake them in from a little branch that's at, face height or something. Yeah, I guess. But half the time they're gonna fly off anyways. It's hardly even worth it. That's how I started out, though. Honestly, I caught swarms. All of our hives were originally swarmed. They were Kirk swarms. I would catch on my lunch break, and we caught a lot of Barkman swarms, and we used to run around the community. We never bought any colonies. Everything I had, we raised up just from swarms. So now I don't bother with it. What we do for us is I pretty much just split their guts out. Is how I keep the swarming down. We try to requeen every year and just split and split and split and split. Just because we're trying still to expand. So swarming is not a big factor for me because I always want more hives usually.
Yeah. And on that note as well, if you split so much, I just thought of this. What about honey production? When do you stop splitting, and do you worry about honey production, or is that not really a lot? Do you not focus on that much?
I'm not a big honey producer. I would like to produce more. A lot of my locations are not great for honey. They're average. And that's been on me. I haven't culled them out. I get attached to bee yards and I'm like, oh, I know this landowner. I know their family. I haven't made a 30-pound box of honey here in 2 years. I should probably move this yard, which I'm doing this year. I promised myself we're culling out a lot of bad locations or not profitable locations. But yeah, it'll definitely eat into your honey. The other thing for us is we don't buy comb from other beekeepers. We raise our own. So we do foundation supers for our honey supers. I usually do deep boxes foundation. So that, of course, will crush your honey crop as they're drawing all that wax out. So we're very, very small when it comes to honey production, but I've just emphasized expanding colonies, and we've been able to offset that loss of revenue by having higher hive numbers to send to California. And that's how we've worked it out. But I think whenever I get to the point where I'm like, hey, I'm okay, I don't want any more colonies, we'll probably emphasize honey production. But yeah, you're 100% right. Splitting them definitely digs into honey production quite a bit.
Awesome. Well, Brian, what you got coming up in the next week or two?
Tomorrow actually, I'm going and I'm talking to one of the local news networks about all of like the colony losses that's going on. I pinged the local news channel that I normally watch and I said, hey, just curious if you guys have heard anything on this. And they were like, no. So I sent them like the numbers that Project Apis had. And the girl, I mean, literally she called me and she was like, what's going on? And I said, no, wish I knew, so she just wants to pop out. She said, would you want to do a quick little interview? I said, yeah, sure. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to get all packed and ready and go to the Caribbean.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome. We're all like, wow, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Well, here in Southeast Alabama, I've done a lot of work the last 4 weeks, I guess 3 to 4 weeks. And so now the bees are kind of in a holding pattern. I'm kind of letting them grow up. I do want to check food supply, and I don't know if this is way, I know you're just like an hour south of me, but it's amazing how different even an hour south you are from me in South. We don't have tie up here and things like that, but we do have other things. We have a lot of wild mustard and stuff going on up here, but I do want to just check and make sure, we go through little mini dearths in the spring. Like we'll have a little flow and the bees will build up and then we have a little mini dearth, it seems like. And so I just want to go check on them. But right now, a lot of the splits I made, I'm going to give them a little time to kind of catch their stride and maybe grow. I do have some colonies I was not able to get split. I didn't have enough queens to split everything. And so some of them are quite strong still down in that Slocum Bee yard. Greg, you're familiar with that yard. And so I'm debating about maybe trying to set up a cloak board and maybe trying to get some grafts going here within the next couple of weeks. But mainly just checking, still just checking, making sure they're growing, making sure there's once again, kind of wait on the colony, making sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And some of these splits are kind of weak because I split them. They were pretty strong, but they flew back to the donor colonies. So, and I really humbled those spicy bees pretty hard. I really broke them down pretty hard. And now the donor colonies are pretty strong. I was amazed that some of those queens got accepted as strong as some of those spicy bees were, but I'm giving them a little time, and I think they should start to settle down. But I'm excited about the upcoming season. Matthew, my main goal, my main money source is the honey. We've got some really good spots up here with the tallow and everything going on. I know you guys, it's amazing how, like I say, just south of us, it's just different, completely different. Just, you're not far at all, but it is so different down there. But that's kind of where I'm at. And videos are going to be coming to following. The next video I put out will be on the queen acceptance rate that we had with the splits we made. I didn't really talk about the me and bee splits much, but overall acceptance was very good on those queens. It kind of surprised me as early as it was. And I really enjoyed that. Enjoyed doing those splits, and Greg helped me get prepared, and Jeremy helped me make the splits, and then I put the cells in. It was just a lot of fun. But I want to I want to turn the time over to you, Matthew, for some final words. Before we do it, I want to just encourage everyone to go check out Matthew's channel. It's Matthew Walker at Walk in the Woods Apiary vlog. Yeah. And he does a tremendous job, just real simple, basic, just thinking through things, showing exactly what he's doing. And the video I watched was the Cloake Board video that he put up a couple days ago, and it's got a ton of views already. It's going to be, I think, one of the classic Cloake Board videos out there, because he just does a tremendous job explaining it. And he does it a little different than the textbook way, but it's a way that makes sense. And just to tell you, Matthew, a little bit, I talked to Sue Kobe back in September. She was down here in Alabama at a conference, and it sounds like you did exactly like she does it. I'd just been to a class on Cloake Board, and I knew that she kind of wrote a paper about it years ago. And the guy in the class talked about turning the boxes around, doing it all the textbook way. And I said, well, how do you do? She's like, we only turn the boxes around. And she described almost what you do. And so, she's a legend the way she does it. And so it sounds like it really works. And so if you're interested in raising queens and you want to see a way that seems to make a lot of sense to me, go check out Matthew's video on Cloake Board. I also encourage you to check out his channel. If you like what you see, go ahead and hit that thumbs up, follow him. He's a commercial guy here, not far from me, but he's just across the line down in Florida, and just doing a lot of really great things. Young Beekeeper started in 2017, right, Matthew? And now it's 2025. So in the last 8 years, you've built from catching swarms and chasing them all throughout town to now you've got 2,000 colonies and you're doing it full time. So if you have any final words for us, just let us know what your thoughts are, Matthew, and then we'll turn it over to Greg to close us out tonight.
I just want to say thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. This is my first live anything, so it's kind of cool. Yeah, it was really fun. I see people do this on YouTube all the time, and I'm always like, hey, and I want to try that one day. And when you asked me, I was nervous. I was like, oh man, I don't know if I can hold a conversation without, because I always edit my podcasts and stuff. So I was like, man, I don't know. I might get tongue tied or say something stupid or, but, I was worried about that part, but I really enjoyed this. This was really fun. Just thanks for having me on, and
awesome.
Thanks for the people that are listening.
Thank you, man. And that's the key we talked about last night. Just be yourself. All of us could talk about bees. We could probably go for 3 or 4 hours, but I don't want to. So, and before we close out, I just want to say thanks to a few people, Brian and Greg, Brian, and of course, Greg, for the super chats. I really appreciate that, guys. Brian, let's see what you guys said. Brian said, Stream Team powers activate. That was at the beginning, so that makes sense. Greg, Be the Lighthouse. In case you don't know, Matthew, that's kind of it was Greg's hashtag, and now we've adopted it with the Stream Team. And I think a lot of people across the country have adopted that, Be the Lighthouse. And maybe Greg could take a second when we close it out to kind of explain what that means. So you'll know, and if we have anyone new in the chat, they'll understand that. We have Redfish. Thanks so much for the super chat or the super sticker. We have Clay Bunner. Thanks again for the super chat. And Dwayne Bittiger. Thanks for the super chat as well. And I appreciate everyone coming in tonight. We are running low on time here. We're going to close this thing out pretty quick. But Greg, if you could take just a minute and tell us what's coming up in your neck of the woods, talk a little bit about being the lighthouse, and close it out for us, man.
Yeah, well, Matthew, thanks for spending some time with us tonight. Like I said, it's always great to be able to learn from each other, all different scales. And what I really appreciate about what you do is you're humble about it. You're at a scale that a lot of folks would dream and aspire to be, but you're very humble. about your accomplishment and what you do, and that's I really appreciate that. It's lost on a lot of folks who are successful in what they do. So definitely appreciate that. I think one of the cool things, is as we go about doing this is, Bruce mentioned, be the lighthouse. It's something that's been our catchphrase, words to live by. It's been a hashtag. It goes back many, many years. It actually goes back thousands and thousands of years. And to the name of our guest here, it really goes back to Matthew 5, verse 16. Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. It's not about us. It's not about how great we do this, how great we do that. But it is about the works that we do. It's by letting our light shine, letting God's love, letting Christ's light shine through all the things that we do. Not that we get a pat on the back, but that we're able to glorify our Father in heaven because of those things. So that's when we say be the lighthouse. That's exactly what that means. So Matthew, thanks for being here and sharing your experience, sharing your journey. There are so many folks out there right now that there doesn't seem to be any light. It seems to be dark. Folks have lost all their bees. Some folks have lost nearly all of their bees, and they're trying to figure out what is the path forward. Do I hang it up? What do we do? And I would just encourage folks to take this the time right now to just evaluate, where you're at. Why are you raising bees? Spend that time in prayer, and God will definitely direct your steps on what to do next. But just know there are so many of us out here, coast to coast, that have suffered immensely through whatever this is right now, and we're still trying to figure all those things out. And maybe we never figure out what exactly is the root cause of all those things. But one thing that I can tell you is that we don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to know the answers. All we have to do is know the one who does. And that's where I put my trust. And I've got full faith that we'll all get through this. We'll all push through. And just remember, the darkest hour is just before dawn. We're about 7 days away from maple bloom. On warm day like today, the bees are flying around. And I'll say this one last thing, Bruce, this one last little story. I was, looking around, and man, the yard is light. It's way lighter than it normally is. And that eats at you, not just from financially, but physically. We are shepherds of these bees. And here they are suffering and dead. And you're just thinking, man, it weighs in on you, just like if it were a flock of sheep. And so I'm sitting here at the sawmill. There's a cant log, a log that it's probably been sitting there for 2 years now. I sit down on it, and it overlooks the learning yard. Folks who have been here, the space, and you can see the pond down the hill through all the trees, and the wind is blowing, and the sun was out, and it was beautiful. And here I am sitting in this place, and I'm just like, man, we can't keep doing this. We just we can't lose bees like this again. Like this is going to be way too hard to bounce back from. And as soon as I start feeling like that, literally one bee, woof, she literally flies almost right to my eyeball, gets my attention, and flies off. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, okay. And then it was another one, and then it was another one. Well, I just happened to be sitting like in the flight path that had just started in that moment, and it did something. It invigorates you. There's just something special about these bugs in a box that we just can't put the words to. But man, it just filled up my sails again, seeing those bees. Just kind of like, get over it, dummy. The spring is coming. Everything is going to be fine. And they were just there as little messengers to remind me of that. But folks, hang in there. The darkest hour is just before dawn. Spring is coming, and I'm just looking forward to just a beautiful, beautiful year this coming spring. Matthew, again, thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks for everyone tuning in, listening. We really appreciate you guys. Next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Whose channel are we on, guys? Okay, we're on the Nature's Image channel. Next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Can't wait to see you then. Until then, we want to remind you to be the lighthouse and be the change you want to see in this world. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.